The grand ballroom was a gilded cage, and Alara was the ghost haunting its corners. Chandeliers dripped crystalline tears of light onto a sea of silk and tailored tuxedos. The air thrummed with a low, meaningless hum, a vibration felt more than heard through the marble floor. For Alara Vance, the only daughter of billionaire Alistair Vance, it was the loudest kind of silence. She stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, watching her own reflection superimposed over the city lights twinkling far below. At 22, she was the heiress to a fortune that could buy islands, yet she couldn't command the simple courtesy of a direct conversation. Her father, a titan of industry with a smile as cold and polished as his watch, was holding court at the center of the room. This gala, like all the others, was a transaction disguised as a celebration. Alara was part of the display, the beautiful, silent daughter who completed the picture of perfect, powerful family. A woman in a sequined gown approached, her mouth moving in exaggerated slowness. "Your dress is just stunning, Alara." Alara offered a tight, practiced smile and a nod. She didn't need to read lips perfectly to know the script. They were all the same. Condescending, pitying, or utterly oblivious. Her father had never bothered to learn more than a few rudimentary signs. Hungry, thirsty, good girl, as if she were a prized pet. Her mother, long absent from the picture, had been the only one who truly spoke her language, a ghost whose memory was as silent as Alara's world. She signed to her reflection, her fingers dancing a lonely ballet in the glass. "I am here. Can anyone see me?" No one did. A waiter swept past, his eyes gliding over her as if she were part of the furniture. A business associate clapped, her father on the back, his booming laughter a physical tremor in the air, his gaze never straying towards the silent girl by the window. The isolation was a physical weight, a constant aching pressure behind her ribs. She was the empire's best-kept secret, polished and presentable, but never truly present. Overwhelmed, she slipped away from the main throng, her silk gown whispering, against the floor as she sought refuge in the hushed, book-lined sanctuary of her father's private study. The air here was quieter, smelled of old leather and dust, a welcome reprieve. She trailed her fingers over the spines of books she could never hear read aloud, the loneliness a sharp, familiar thorn. A movement at the far end of the room made her start. A man in a simple, dark uniform was meticulously wiping down a mahogany desk. The janitor. He'd been invisible to her, just part of the background staff. He looked up, and for a fleeting second their eyes met. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with kind eyes that held a depth she didn't expect to see in this house. He quickly looked down, returning to his work, and Alara's brief flicker of hope extinguished. Of course, another person who would look through her. She turned to leave, the familiar ache of disappointment settling in her stomach. But then, a flicker of movement in the large, dark television screen caught her eye. She froze. Reflected in the screen, she saw him. The janitor. He wasn't cleaning. He was standing still, his hands raised. Slowly, Alara turned around. His gaze was direct, no longer shifty or deferential, and his hands, they were moving, shaping the air with an unpracticed but unmistakable grace. "Your shadow," he signed, each movement deliberate, a little clumsy. It looked lonely. The air left Alara's lungs. No one in this house in her life had ever signed to her. Not like this. Not to say something real. It was a language reserved for the hired therapists and tutors of her childhood, never for a spontaneous human moment. Tears, hot and sudden, pricked at her eyes. She blinked them back, her own hands rising, trembling slightly. "You no sign?" her fingers asked, the question feeling alien and wonderful on her skin. A shy, almost sad smile touched his lips. "A little. My sister." She was deaf. The past tense hung in the air between them, a shared, unspoken understanding of loss. He took a hesitant step closer, the space between them charged with a new electric energy. "I am Leo," he signed. Ilara. I know, he signed back, then quickly added, not just the billionaire's daughter. You are the one who reads poetry books. The one who paints. He gestured to a small, forgotten canvas in the corner, a splash of color she'd done years ago. He saw her. He had been seeing her all along. For the next hour, in the silent, sacred space of the study, the gilded cage fell away. They spoke of everything and nothing. He told her about his sister, how she taught him the world through her eyes, how she loved the feel of rain because she could see its rhythm. Ilara told him about the suffocating silence of parties, the frustration of being a symbol instead of a person. Their dialogue was a quiet, rushing river of shared confidences, their hands painting pictures more vivid than any spoken word could convey. Leo's signs were sometimes slow, his vocabulary limited, but his intent was pure, his attention absolute. He made her feel not deaf but listened to. For the first time in years, the hollow space inside her began to feel warm. The study door swung open with a violent crash. Alistair Vance stood there, his face a mask of thunderous confusion that quickly morphed into cold fury. His eyes darted from his daughter's animated, tear-streaked face to the janitor's raised hands. The scene, a beautiful, secret language he couldn't comprehend, was a direct affront to his control. What is the meaning of this? His voice was a low, dangerous vibration in the floorboards. Ilara flinched, instinctively reading his lips. She stepped forward, her hands flying. Father, we were just talking. Alistair's gaze swept over her signs as if they were gnats in the air. He focused his fury on Leo. You, get out. You're fired. Don't you ever come near my daughter again. Leo's shoulders slumped. He gave Ilara one last long look, his eyes filled with a heartbreaking apology. I'm sorry, he signed, so quickly she almost missed it. Then he was gone, ushered out by a security guard Alistair had summoned with a sharp jerk of his head. The door to the study closed, leaving Ilara alone with her father. The silence that returned was no longer peaceful. It was a tomb. How could you? She signed, her movements sharp with rage and grief. How could I? Alistair spat, his voice dripping with contempt. He was a janitor, Ilara, a nobody, preying on a vulnerable girl. I will not have you associating with the help. It ends now. He turned and left, locking the door from the outside. A petty, powerful gesture. Ilara sank to the floor, the cold marble leaching the warmth Leo had given her. She was back in her cage, but this time she had tasted freedom, and she knew what it looked like. It looked like kind eyes and gentle hands that spoke her language. It looked like Leo. The following week was a return to the gray. Alistair, spooked and more controlling than ever, had increased her security detail and canceled her art classes. Her world shrank back to the confines of the penthouse, a prison of luxury and isolation. The memory of Leo was a secret ember she guarded fiercely, the only warm thing in the cold opulence that surrounded her. She replayed their conversation in her mind 1,000 times, the shapes his hands had made etched behind her eyelids. Her father tried to bridge the chasm with things. A new faster tablet, a priceless necklace. He even hired a new stern-faced sign language interpreter who signed with cold, perfect, emotionless precision. It was like being read a dictionary. It meant nothing. You need to forget that. Incident, Ilara, Alistair said one evening, his voice carefully modulated as he spoke to her while she stared out the window. She read his lips in the reflection. I am protecting you. The world is full of people who will want you for your name, for my money. He didn't want your money, she signed fiercely, whirling around. He saw me. You are naive, he stated, his expression final. It is my job to be cynical for the both of us. Hope was beginning to curdle into despair. She had no way to find Leo, no way to contact him. He was a phantom, a beautiful dream she'd been forced to wake from. Then, a week to the day after the gala, a small, plain envelope was delivered to the penthouse, bypassing the usual security screening. It was addressed to her in a neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tore it open. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a key. The note was written in the same neat hand. Ilara, I know I was not supposed to contact you. I lost my job for a reason I would pay that price 1,000 times over. For 1 hour, you made me feel less invisible too. Your father believes I wanted something from you. He is right. But it wasn't money. I wanted to return something that was yours. Your voice. My sister Clara, she left me something. A place where she felt free. I think you would understand it. I've left the address. The key is yours. If you want to see it, come at sunset tomorrow. No one will bother you there. Whatever you decide, thank you for that hour. Leo, tears streamed down Ilara's face, blurring the ink. This was it. Her chance. Her rebellion. The next day, she enacted a simple, desperate plan. She feigned a migraine, retreating to her room with dramatic sighs that even her father could understand. Once the hallway was clear, she changed into simple clothes, tucked her hair into a cap, and using a service key she'd stolen years ago and never used, slipped out a delivery entrance. Her heart was a wild bird beating against her ribs. She was free. The address led her to an older, bohemian part of the city, to a narrow brick building tucked between a cafe and a bookstore. A small hand-painted sign by the door read, "The Quiet Canvas Studio." She slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. The space inside took her breath away. It was a large open loft with huge north-facing windows bathing the room in the golden light of the setting sun. Canvases of all sizes leaned against the walls. But these weren't ordinary paintings. They were explosions of texture, thick, swirling layers of paint embedded with beads, fabric, sand, and metal. They were art you didn't just see, you felt. You experienced it with your hands, your soul. It was a language beyond sound. And on an easel in the center of the room was a fresh canvas. Next to it, a palette of vibrant colors and a note. For you. She was so captivated she didn't hear the soft footsteps behind her. A gentle tap on her shoulder made her spin around. It was Leo. He looked tired, but his eyes were alight with the same kindness she remembered. You came, he signed, his movements fluid with relief and joy. The floodgates opened. They talked with their hands, a frantic, beautiful rush of explanation. He told her how his sister had started this studio as a safe haven for deaf artists, a place to create art that celebrated their sensory world. How he'd been maintaining it in her memory after she passed from a sudden illness. This is what I wanted to show you, he signed. This is what your father could never understand. It's not about money. It's about this. He gestured around the beautiful, silent, tactile room. It's about a world that speaks a different language. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and orange, Leo led her to the blank canvas. He placed a brush in her hand, his fingers gently closing over hers for a moment. The touch was electric. Your father only hears the noise of wealth, he signed. He is deaf to everything else. The truth of his statement hit her with the force of a physical blow. It was the most profound thing anyone had ever said to her. In that moment, surrounded by her sister's legacy and seeing the love in Leo's eyes, Ilara knew she could never go back to her gilded cage. She would have this. She would have him. She would have a life that was hers. She reached for him, her hands framing his face, and pressed her lips to his in a soft, lingering kiss. It was a promise. It was a beginning. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Leo's eyes were shining. He pulled a small, worn velvet box from his pocket. Her breath hitched. It was too soon, too sudden, and yet it felt perfectly right. He didn't open it. Instead, he pressed it into her hand. Clara wanted the person who understood this place to have this, he signed. I think that's you. Trembling, her heart full to bursting, Ilara opened the box. There was no ring inside. Nestled on the velvet was a small, ceramic data chip, the kind used for digital backups, and a faded black and white photograph of a little girl. She was smiling, her hands frozen in a sign Ilara recognized instantly. Hello. It was the same little girl whose portrait hung in her father's study. The one he told everyone was a distant cousin who had died young. The sister he said he never had. Ilara's eyes, wide with dawning horror, slowly lifted from the photograph to meet Leo's gaze. The kindness in his eyes was now layered with a deep, ancient pain. My name isn't Leo, he signed, his hands steady, his expression grim. It's William. William Vance. Clara was our sister. The world tilted on its axis. The loft, the beautiful art, the feeling of escape, it all crumbled into dust. The janitor wasn't a stranger. He was her brother, the brother her father had disowned, erased from the family history for choosing his deaf sister's world over the family's empire of sound. The twist wasn't that he loved her. It was that he had come back to claim what was theirs, not the money, but the truth. And in doing so, he had just made their forbidden, heartbreaking love story something infinitely more tragic and infinitely more dangerous.